Venice, 1075. A city rising from the water like a dream sculpted in marble and mist. Every dawn painted gold on its canals. Every dusk sank in the fragrance of incense and wet stone. The people lived between silence and splendor, between saints and secrets. And then, one winter night, the air changed. The wind carried something no one could name. Not the perfume of prayer, not the breath of the sea, but something heavier, something dying. The first to notice were the servants in the Doge's palace. They whispered of a scent that slid beneath doors, that clung to silk that made candles quiver. It came, they said, from the eastern wing, from the chambers of the Byzantine princess, Theodora Doukaina. She had arrived months earlier, a living treaty between two empires, her beauty wrapped in layers of silver veils. They said she smelled of roses and myrrh. Even her voice seemed perfumed, soft and slow, like smoke from a censer. The Venetians had never seen such finery. Her gowns were woven with gold thread. Her hair shone like sun on brass. They called her Theodora the Radiant. But radiance does not last. By winter's end, she no longer appeared at feasts. Her windows were shuttered. Musicians stopped playing in her hall. When her ladies were questioned, they bowed their heads and spoke of illness. Yet every day the air around her grew heavier. The palace, once alive with music, now trembled in silence. The scent spread faster than rumor. It reached the kitchens, the stairways, the council chamber. No one dared speak of it aloud, but everyone felt it. The mixture of sweet and sour, of flowers and death. A scent that seemed to weep. When the Doge's physicians entered her room, they returned pale and speechless. One whispered that her skin no longer belonged to the living. Another claimed her breath carried the perfume of decay, but no one could agree on the cause. Some said it was disease, a slow, unseen rot born of foreign lands. Others whispered of punishment, that Venice had offended heaven by marrying her Doge's blood to an Eastern woman. A few spoke of witchcraft, of spirits carried in the oils. She wore gifts from Constantinople that had turned against her flesh. And so, while Theodora's body withered, Venice itself began to divide. In the marketplaces, merchants mocked the luxuries of the East. In the churches, preachers warned that beauty itself had become corruption. Yet others, enchanted by the legend, copied her ways, painting their lips red, burning foreign oils, adorning themselves with Byzantine jewels. The city was turning into a mirror of its dying princess, half divine, half rotting. Inside her chamber, Theodora lay in twilight. The once smooth air of her room was thick with perfumes and prayers. Icons lined the walls, their gold halos dimmed by smoke. She prayed without voice, her thoughts breaking like glass. At night she dreamed of the Bosphorus, of sunlight on marble, of her mother's hands weaving silk. She awoke to darkness and the sound of the sea pressing against the stones. She asked for fresh flowers daily, believing that life could mask death. But even the roses began to blacken before they wilted. Her maids grew ill from tending her, coughing behind their veils. Soon no one entered except a priest, who burned incense until his lungs trembled. Outside her door, the guards covered their faces with cloth. The Doge himself refused to approach. Yet he ordered that she be cared for, not out of love, but politics. Theodora was still a princess of Byzantium. Her death would mean dishonor, and so she remained alive in name, entombed in luxury. By February, the city's wind carried her story through every canal. Fishermen said the lagoon smelled strange at dawn, like roses floating on rot. Mothers warned their children not to speak her name after dark. Some said her scent haunted dreams. Others swore that at night the moon above Venice turned the color of old flesh. Yet even as fear spread, curiosity grew. Could beauty truly rot? Could holiness decay from within? Theodora became a mystery that Venetians could neither cleanse nor forget. One night, a young scribe named Marco slipped into the palace garden to glimpse the cursed princess's window. He saw a single candle burning behind the shutters, then a shadow moving, slow and trembling, like a ghost trying to breathe. He later swore that the air around him smelled not of death but of tears, the scent of something that wanted forgiveness. Inside, Theodora wrote letters she never sent. In them, she begged her husband to remember her not as she was dying, but as she had been when she first arrived, shining, adored, unbroken. She sealed each letter with wax shaped like a rose, then burned it. Smoke filled the chamber, carrying her sorrow to the rafters. When her strength failed, she asked for her mirror. The servants refused, but she insisted. They placed it before her and stepped back in fear. What she saw made her tremble. Her face was pale as bone, her lips dry and cracked, her hair a tangle of dust. But worse than her reflection was what she smelled, her own body fading beneath perfumes and prayer. She pressed her hand against the glass, and for a moment she thought she saw the sea moving within it. Then came the final sign. A guard stationed outside her door fell unconscious at dawn. When he awoke, his eyes were wide with terror. He said that while he slept, a voice called from within the room. It was gentle, royal, and filled with despair. It said, "Do not open the door, the sea has come for me." By sunrise, the palace was in uproar. Priests rushed to bless the corridors. Servants fled their posts. And in the mist rising from the lagoon, Venice itself seemed to hold its breath. From that day onward, the people would say that beauty had died in Venice. But those who had smelled the princess's scent whispered something else. That she had not died at all, but changed. That her soul had left the flesh behind and become part of the air. And the air but still remembered her name. Venice did not sleep after the princess's scent filled its corridors. It breathed in fear. Every gust of wind that crossed the lagoon seemed to carry her presence, faint, floral, and terrible. The people said the air itself had memory now, that it could no longer be washed clean by salt or prayer. Theodora Doukaina remained unseen. Curtains stayed drawn, her windows sealed. The Doge ordered that the eastern wing be abandoned. Servants were forbidden to speak her name, yet whispers multiplied faster than silence could kill them. In the city below, markets murmured her legend. The fishermen who docked at dawn said they could smell her from the water, a sweetness drifting from the palace roof like invisible smoke. Bakers claimed their bread spoiled in the ovens. Midwives said newborns refused their first breath when the wind turned east. Venice, the proud jewel of the Adriatic, began to doubt its own reflection. At the Basilica of San Marco, priests chanted longer and louder, burning enough incense to drown the stench. Clouds of smoke rolled through the marble aisles, thick and gold, hiding the worried faces of the faithful. But even through that holy fog, something darker moved. The people began to ask if God had abandoned them. Then came the sermons. A friar named Lorenzo rose in the city squares, a man with eyes like fire and a voice that could command both mercy and rage. He told the crowds that Theodora's sickness was not of the flesh but of the soul. She brought the vanity of the East, he thundered, and her decay is the decay of pride. If Venice does not repent, her scent will become ours. Men crossed themselves. Women wept. The bells of San Zaccaria tolled as if answering his prophecy. In the Doge's palace, panic grew quieter but sharper. The council met in secret, their voices trembling beneath painted ceilings. Some wanted the princess sent away on her mound to a monastery, to a ship, to anywhere that might hide her shame. Others feared Byzantium's wrath if she died dishonored. The Doge himself listened in silence. He had not seen his wife for months, but every night when the wind shifted, her perfume crept beneath his door like a ghost. He sat by his lamp until dawn, watching the flames shudder. He wondered if the air itself accused him, for marrying beauty when he should have married peace. Beyond the palace walls, the people changed. Markets filled with preachers and impostors claiming to sell cures against the eastern scent, amulets of copper, blessed oils, relics of dead saints. Every man and woman in Venice began to smell of fear, a mix of smoke, sweat, and desperation. And yet fascination lingered. Artists painted her portrait from memory. They called her the Saint of Decay. Poets wrote verses about her sorrow. Some young nobles began to wear her favorite perfumes to show they were unafraid. At night, gondoliers sang songs in her name, mournful, slow, echoing across the canals like prayers for forbidden beauty. Theodora had become more than a woman. She was a myth taking root in the heart of Venice. Inside her chamber, she could not hear the sermons or the songs. She only felt the weight of her own breath. Her body weakened, but her thoughts grew sharper, clearer, more distant from pain. Sometimes she felt as though she were floating just above her bed, light as dust. She spoke to the icons on her wall, not in words, but in whispers carried by the smoke of her lamps. She told the Virgin that she was sorry. She told the sea that she was ready. She told herself that she had once been beautiful, and that beauty had been her sin. When she wept, her tears smelled faintly of roses. Days passed. The priests who tended her stopped coming. The Doge's physicians disappeared without farewell. Only one servant, a girl too young to fear death, remained. Each morning she left fresh water by the door and listened. Sometimes she heard prayer, sometimes silence. But on the 10th morning she heard laughter, soft, broken, and wrong. She ran to tell the guards, but they refused to enter. The girl swore the voice had not come from pain or madness. It was joy, as if the princess had heard something beautiful that no one else could. That night, the fog thickened across the canals. Lanterns turned pale, their light swallowed by silver mist. Gondolas stopped moving. Even the water seemed to still. And from the direction of the palace, a strange sound drifted over the lagoon. A melody, slow and foreign, like the songs of Constantinople sung in a dying tongue. The Doge awoke before dawn. He walked to the balcony, wrapped in his robe, and stared into the mist. He thought he saw movement, a woman's shape white against the water, walking where no bridge stood. But when he called out, the figure vanished, leaving only ripples. By morning, Venice was certain of one thing. Theodora Doukaina had died. The bells tolled, but no body was shown. The Doge gave no decree. The palace gates stayed closed. And yet the scent remained, stronger than ever, rolling through the city like a tide. Some claimed she had been buried at sea. Others said she had dissolved into air. But an old fisherman told another story. He said he saw her reflection in the lagoon just before sunrise. Not her face, but her shadow moving beneath the water, smiling as though she had finally become one with it. When he looked again, the surface was calm, and the scent of roses lingered on his hands. That night, a single candle burned in her window, and the city, though it no longer believed in miracles, began to pray. Venice had survived wars, storms, and betrayals, but it had never known fear like this. The death of Theodora Doukaina should have ended the whispers. Instead, it began something worse. Her scent, once confined to the palace, now drifted through the narrow alleys and open squares. It seeped into churches, homes, and hearts. Some called it perfume, others prophecy. No one could escape it. At dawn, the lagoon glowed strangely pale. The fishermen said the water no longer smelled of salt, but of roses. Children fell ill first, fainting in the streets, trembling with fever. Their mothers washed them in holy water, but the sickness clung like guilt. By week's end, the plague had a name: Theodora's breath. Friar Lorenzo had been waiting for this moment. He stood on the steps of San Marco, his voice echoing across the piazza. "The princess is not gone," he cried. "She walks among us, punishing those who loved her vanity. Venice has sinned when the scent of sin cannot die." His sermons drew thousands. They came with candles and tears, chanting her name not in pity but in terror. The Doge listened from behind his shutters. His city was dissolving into panic. Merchants closed their stalls. Gondoliers refused to ferry the sick. Bells tolled day and night until even their sound became hollow. The Doge ordered the churches to open their doors for the dying, but soon even the priests began to flee. And through it all, Lorenzo's voice grew louder. He spoke of visions, of angels weeping over the canals, of a woman dressed in white walking through the mist, her eyes covered by veils of smoke. "Do not look upon her," he warned, "for beauty has become poison." Yet some Venetians did look. They claimed to see her reflection in the water, her figure flickering in the glass of the basilica lamps. Artists painted her face without ever having seen her. Lovers wore rose petals around their necks, saying it would protect them from her anger. Death and desire became the same breath. The plague crept like mist through every open window. Corpses floated in the canals, their hands pale as wax. Even the pigeons abandoned St. Mark's Square. Doctors wrapped in robes and beaked masks burned herbs that turned the sky green. Still the scent endured, sweet, unbearable, and eternal. In the silence of his chambers, the Doge began to pray. He asked God for mercy, but none came. His dreams filled with whispers. Sometimes he heard Theodora calling his name. Other times it was laughter, soft, forgiving, and cruel. Lorenzo, now the voice of vengeance, marched through the streets with his followers. They carried torches and crosses, setting fire to the homes of those accused of Eastern corruption. Perfume shops, silks, and foreign merchants were destroyed. The Doge ordered his guards to stop them, but many had joined the mob. Venice burned by its own reflection. One night, the friar stood upon the bridge of Rialto, staring into the black water below. He swore he saw her there, her face rising from the depths, her lips moving as if in prayer. He fell to his knees. "Forgive us," he whispered, trembling. "Tell us what you want." A gust of wind passed over the canal, carrying the faint scent of roses in decay. Lorenzo wept openly. He turned to his followers and declared, "She does not seek our death. She seeks remembrance." The words spread like wildfire. Within days, shrines appeared across the city. Candles burning beside bowls of water, petals floating upon the surface. Mothers prayed to her for protection. Lovers swore oaths in her name. The city had turned its fear into worship. But the plague did not stop. The Doge summoned Lorenzo to the palace. The friar arrived barefoot, his robe torn by devotion. "You have turned my city against itself," the Doge said. "You promised her forgiveness, but you bring only fire." Lorenzo bowed his head. "She will not rest until you do." The Doge's face paled. "Do what?" The friar looked up, his eyes distant as though he listened to a voice only he could hear. "Until you confess why she died." That night, thunder rolled over the lagoon. The storm washed the streets clean of blood, but not of sorrow. In the morning, the plague grew worse. Whole families vanished overnight, their homes silent except for the flutter of curtains. And then came the miracle, or the curse. In the poorest quarter of the city, a child was found alive in a street of corpses. She was no more than 6 years old, her skin pale, her eyes open and clear. She held a rose in her hand, fresh, unmarked by decay. When the priest asked her what had happened, she smiled faintly and whispered, "The Lady of Roses spoke to me. She said Venice will remember." Then she closed her eyes, still smiling, as the church bells began to toll. The sound carried across the lagoon, over the ruins and the water, reaching even the Doge's window. He knew what it meant. Venice was no longer his. It belonged to her now, to the scent, the sin, and the silence she had left behind. Venice no longer breathed, and it whispered. The plague had hollowed its heart. The gondolas drifted empty, bumping softly against the stone. The canals carried the scent of flowers and death, an endless reminder that beauty could not be trusted. Bells rang so often that silence itself became a stranger, and in the high tower of the ducal palace, the Doge sat alone. He had stopped speaking to his council. Letters from Byzantium lay unopened upon his desk. The servants had fled. Only the sea remained faithful, tapping softly against the palace foundations like the pulse of something still alive beneath the surface. The Doge had loved Theodora, or what he believed love was. He had been warned that the Byzantine princess carried not just jewels but secrets, the rituals of her homeland, the powders, the perfumes, the strange prayers whispered at night. But her beauty silenced reason. He married her for her grace, and when the city rejoiced, he told himself the scent upon her skin was a blessing. Until it became a curse. The first signs had come with her fainting spells, her skin too pale, her blood too sweet. The doctors could not explain it. Some whispered poison, others divine punishment. The Doge, fearing scandal, forbade anyone to speak. He locked her chambers and ordered silence. He told the city she was ill from travel, that she would recover soon. But she did not recover, she wept. She begged for confession, and he would not let her. Now, as Venice rotted under the perfume of her ghost, the Doge heard her voice in every wind. At night, the curtains swayed without cause, and a faint laughter moved through the air. Not cruel, only distant, as if forgiving him too easily. Friar Lorenzo came again, barefoot, his eyes burning with revelation. "My lord," he said, "the city will die if you do not speak." "The curse is not hers. It is yours," the Doge trembled. "What would you have me confess?" "That you silenced her," Lorenzo said softly. "That you sealed her chambers not from pity but from shame. That you let her die without prayer." The Doge turned to the window. Below, Venice burned candles for the dead, thousands of flames trembling on the water. "If I speak," he whispered, "the people will turn upon me." "They already have," said the friar, "and still they die." That night the Doge walked to the Basilica of San Marco. He went without guards, without crown, without pride. The streets were empty but for the sound of the bells. Endless, mournful, metallic rain. Inside the church, hundreds lay sleeping on the cold floor, too weak to rise. Priests burned incense in a losing war against the scent that clung to every breath. The Doge climbed the altar steps. His voice echoed beneath the golden domes. "People of Venice," he said, "you have prayed for mercy. Now hear the truth." He told them of Theodora's illness, of the days she begged to see light, and the nights he ignored her tears. He spoke of his fear that her disease was foreign, unholy, that her beauty had brought shame upon him. "So I hid her," he said, his voice breaking. "I sealed her away from the world, from God, from all of you, and until her voice fell silent." He fell to his knees. "Forgive me. Her death was my doing. This plague is my sin made flesh." The crowd listened in stunned silence. Even the bells stopped, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Lorenzo stepped forward, his face pale in the candlelight. "Then confess to her," he said. "Go to her chamber. Kneel where she died." The Doge nodded. Together they walked through the empty corridors, the sound of their footsteps echoing like the beat of a dying heart. When they reached her door, the Doge hesitated. The air still carried the faintest trace of roses. He entered alone. What happened inside was never written. But those who kept watch that night swore they heard him weeping, then laughing, then praying, until his voice broke into silence. When Lorenzo entered, he found the Doge kneeling before an open window, his crown on the floor, his eyes open but seeing nothing. He was dead, but his face was calm, as if he had seen her and was no longer afraid. The next morning, the plague stopped spreading. The canals ran still. For the first time in months, the air smelled of salt again. Venice believed the curse was over. Bells rang not for mourning, but for hope. The city began to breathe. That night, Friar Lorenzo returned to San Marco to give thanks. He prayed at the altar until dawn, but when the priests entered to light the candles, they found him slumped beside the cross, his lips stained red, and a single rose placed upon his chest. No one knew who had left it. Outside, the wind carried a soft, sweet scent across the lagoon, faint, forgiving, eternal. Venice did not die, it changed. After the Doge and the friar were laid to rest, the plague lifted like mist after rain. The air grew light again, the waters clear. But the city that awoke was not the same as the one that had fallen asleep in fear. People spoke softly now, as if afraid to wake old ghosts. Bells rang only for prayer. Candles burned longer. And though the scent of roses had faded from the streets, it never left the hearts of those who had lived through the season of decay. The Doge's name was erased from records. The court decreed that no painting of Theodora Doukaina should remain, yet her face lingered everywhere. In frescoes half scraped away, in the marble curves of forgotten statues, in the corners of mirrors where light trembled just so, Venice, even in denial, could not forget her. The survivors rebuilt the markets. They filled them with spices and perfumes from the east once more. But when merchants opened their crates and the fragrance drifted out, the oldest among them would cross themselves, whispering, "She has returned." A generation passed. The story of the rotting princess became legend, a tale told to children on stormy nights. They said she had been too beautiful for this world, that God had marked her as a lesson against pride. Others claimed she was a saint, a martyr of sorrow, punished for sins that were not hers. No one agreed, and yet every spring when the fog rose from the lagoon, the air carried a trace of roses again. Artists painted her secretly. Writers wrote her name into songs disguised as prayers. Pilgrims came from distant lands searching for her resting place. Some swore they had found it, a sealed room beneath the palace filled with broken mirrors and the faintest scent of perfume that never faded. But the priests denied it. The Doge's descendants forbade it, and still the story lived on. Centuries turned. Empires rose and fell. The plague became history, the friar a myth, the Doge a forgotten name. But Theodora remained, not as a woman, but as a feeling. A reminder that beauty and decay are the same breath, that love and sin can share the same perfume. The sea remembered her. It carried her story to every port, until sailors whispered her name as they crossed the Adriatic, fearing to anger the ghost of Venice. The Lady of Roses, they called her, the princess who would not rot. In the archives of the basilica, A final record remains, a note written in a trembling hand. When the scent returns, Venice must kneel. And so, every year, when spring begins and the fog thickens, the city holds its breath. The tourists laugh, unaware. But the gondoliers row slower. The old women light candles at their windows. The priests close the church doors early. Because somewhere between the tides and the wind she still walks. Some say she appears in the reflection of the lagoon, her figure shimmering just beneath the water, smiling faintly. Others say her voice rides the bells of dawn, soft, distant, forgiving. No one dares to call her name aloud. One morning, long after the story should have died, a traveler stood by the water before sunrise. The city was silent. The mist touched the stones like a prayer. He leaned over the edge, staring at his reflection. Then it changed. A second face appeared beside his, pale, serene, crowned with shadows. He froze. For a moment he smelled roses, sweet and unbearable. And then faintly beneath the water he heard laughter, gentle, endless, and echoing from another time. When he looked again, the lagoon was empty. Venice was awake. The sun rose over the domes, gilding them in light. The bells rang. Life went on, but the scent remained.